छाया आसमां देखो झूमता गगन है छाया आसमां देखो झूमता गगन
Hi everyone, it's Gwen from Hummingbird Tarot. Welcome, I'm so happy to see you again, and I am excited to share with you today the tarot decks that were on my shelf in the month of September. So you may have noticed I haven't been around as much as I normally am, and I needed to take some time for some self-care and step away from social media for a little bit. I'm feeling better now. It's been a tough time in the world right now. I needed to take some time off and focus on self-care, and I've done that. I feel good, like I have turned a corner now. I'm heading in the right direction, and I feel a deep sense of peace that I haven't felt in a really long time. Peace and satisfaction. It's such a huge thing that normally I try to live my life in a place of optimism and gratitude, and that helps you have a lot more satisfaction in your life and just be happy with what you have and where you are and in your relationships in your life. And when life gets so complicated that you can't get to that space, everything is more difficult. So I'm happy that my time focusing on self-care has helped me shift back into what I feel like is me. And I'm looking forward to continuing to improve on my sense of peace and satisfaction and gratitude and live back in this space again. I've missed being here, and I'm very happy to be here again. So let me share some of the tarot decks that have been on my shelf this past month, in the month of September, and I had them here in the month of August as well to help me get back to this place of inner peace that I've found. Let me just start with the decks that aren't going to be a surprise. I have the Rider-Waite Tarot, and this is a part of the Complete Tarot Kit, which is a kit that came with this deck as well as the Aleister Crowley deck, and a book that compares the two against each other and talks a little bit about the history of tarot. It was a surprise package for me, but the deck is a really good size, and this is one of my go-to decks lately. I love the Rider-Waite Smith deck. I really feel comfortable and at home with it more than any other deck, and it's a good size deck, and I use this one a lot. Sometimes I just shuffle it because it's a small, good size, and if I'm feeling a little out of sorts, it's like a security blanket to me. I've said this many times before. All of my tarot decks in my collection are like a security blanket to me, and when I'm feeling unsettled, even if I'm not reading tarot actively, I may have a tarot deck in my hand and just be shuffling it and playing with it in my hands to help calm me and bring me a sense of peace. It really helps me a lot. And then as I'm shuffling it, I may just, flip up a card or two every once in a while and take a look at that and see if there are any messages in there that I need to take with me. Another deck that I've been going to a lot is the Lightseers Tarot. If you have this deck at home, you know that this deck is it brings light, just in the name, it really brings a lot of light. I've colored the edges to match each of the cards here. And I'm sure you're familiar with maybe I'll turn it around. I'm sure you're familiar with the artwork. The colors are just so vibrant. They have a great sense of energy in them. And the messages are very positive and radiant. And there's so many of these cards that just bring such a great sense of joy when I look at them. And it's almost like just this fresh air of joy washing over me when I'm using this deck, and I love it. Here's what the back of that deck looks like. I also have some oracle decks that I've been using a lot. The first one is one that's on my tarot shelf quite a bit, the Sacred Traveler from Denise Linn. Here's what the back looks like, and I've colored the edges to match. It's got like a rose petal finish on it, and this one has lots of positive messages. You can see there's a saying at the top and then a little bit further description at the bottom. This deck does have diversity in it. There's lots of different cultures and religions represented in it. I'm not really showing that a lot in these samples that I'm giving you here, but you'll see lots of different traditions represented here. But it's just such a very calm and ethereal deck that I get a sense of peace every time that I'm reading with this one. And it's a very positive and uplifting deck as well. And that is the type of deck that I found for the most part to be very helpful through this time of self-care that I took for myself. Here's another one I've shared before, the Happy Tarot. Here's what the back looks like. And if you've seen the movie Wreck-It Ralph, you'll see what I'm talking about here. But it's just such a silly, fun deck. It makes me smile, but it still conveys, it's very clearly a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck, and it still very clearly gives you the message that you need to hear. But it's almost like one of those fun friends that you hang out with that says it like it is, but they say it in a kind way with a smile on their face, and they're making you laugh while they're insulting you or whatever it is that they're telling you. That they're telling you what you don't want to hear, but they're doing it in such a way that you don't mind so much, and you get it, and you appreciate it rather than taking it to the heart like it sometimes can feel like when somebody gives you news. Another deck I've been reading with that is kind of a cross between a tarot deck and an oracle deck is the Psychic Tarot Oracle. In the time that I got this deck, I was feeling drawn to this deck for a very long time, and when I finally got it, I understood why I'd been drawn to it for so long, and I felt such an instant and deep connection with it, and I have been using it consistently since this deck joined my collection. And I can understand now why I was directed to add this to my collection. And here are some of the cards. You'll see that the court cards are missing in this deck, and it's basically a Rider-Waite-Smith based tarot deck without the court cards. And then on top of that, they do have chakra cards representing the chakras. And so the card number is similar in what you would find. It does have the major arcana, and it's similar to what you would find in a regular tarot deck. It's just a few cards off because you take away the court cards and then you add back in the chakra cards. This deck, I mean, the only way that I can describe this deck when I'm using it is that feeling of spirituality and very much a sense of presence that you get. And I can only compare it to what you feel when you're in a place that just feels holy. And if that is a church to you, when you walk in the door and you can just feel the peace surround you and the spirituality from all the people that have been there before you, or if you're in a place in nature that is just so beautiful and makes you feel like you're the only person that's ever been there, and you can feel the sense of nature and the connection to the earth, that sense of holiness that exists in that type of a place there. That's really the feeling that this deck brings to me. I really feel like it's an instant connection to my spirituality and an instant connection to things that make me immediately remember that the whole world is not focused on me, and I'm a part of a much bigger thing than just myself, and really helps me get out of my head and get back into my heart and my spirituality where I need to be faster than any other deck that I've ever had in my hands. And it's shocking to me that deck does that for me, but that's the experiences that I've had with this deck, and I really appreciate it coming into my life. So another deck that I have been working with is the Tarot of the New Vision, and this one is basically you'll see that's the Fool there. The entire deck here is from a different perspective. It's almost like if you were in the Rider-Waite-Smith world watching as these images or these snapshots were taken of the typical Rider-Waite-Smith images, and then you decided to stroll around and walk behind the person or the focus of that card and look at it from the backside, and you can see what the Fool is looking at, what's in front of the Fool. And if you can see in this one, there's a volcano exploding here. This is a deck that's really, sorry, I'm trying not to reflect on you here. This is a deck that's really been used for a lot of people that's really been used by a lot of people for shadow work, and I definitely found it helpful. I have done a bit of shadow work in my self-care, just seeing where I want to focus my positivity and my energy and my gratitude first in my life to help shift gears in the places that were attracting things that I didn't want to attract. And that's basically the type of shadow work that I was doing. I really try to live my life by the law of attraction and focusing on attracting the things that I want in my life rather than focusing on the things that I don't want in my life. But as a part of my self-care, I felt like I really needed to identify the biggest things that were taking my concentration and my focus and my energy away from where I needed it to be. And there was so much going on. I needed some help cutting through all that and really getting to the source of the things that I wanted to focus on first. And that's what I used this deck for that. Now, I know a lot of people use this deck in conjunction with the Rider-Waite-Smith, and they'll just shuffle two decks together, a Rider-Waite-Smith standard deck, and then this one as well, to kind of have those hints of shadow work in with the regular readings. And that's definitely a way that can be used. I pulled it with intention of only focusing on the things that I wanted to improve first and that I felt like needed the most of my attention, and that's how I was using this deck. And I found it very helpful and very insightful. You know, sometimes life is like the Seven of Cups. So I can really feel like life is sometimes like the Seven of Cups, and I went ahead and pulled that here. And there's just too many options, too much going on, and you get overwhelmed by the options and the choices there. And it's nice to have some help focusing in and zeroing in on what it is that you really would be the most successful at improving if you focus on those things first. And that's kind of what I was using the Tarot with a New Vision to help me with. One of my neighbors has got loud music on right now, so sorry if you can hear that in the background. I have a few more decks here in my collection. Okay, this one is the Golden Universal Tarot. This one's just a really beautiful deck. Here's the back of what it looks like. And then the cards here just have a lot of gold gilding in the back edge there. And again, I feel like I was drawn to the decks for this past little bit that really bring me comfort. The Rider-Waite-Smith deck brings me comfort. It feels like, living in that space just feels like home to me. And sometimes when I use Rider-Waite-Smith decks, clones, or that are decks that are based on it, or decks that are completely outside of it, like the Alistair, like the Crowley deck or Lenormand, I don't feel quite as at home, and it takes a little bit more work for me to get to the spiritual spiritual message that I'm supposed to be getting from that reading, or giving from that reading. And I think that's why this last little bit, here's a really pretty one too. You can see all the gold in there. This last little bit, I've been drawn to Rider-Waite-Smith decks that are in my collection. And I will be putting together a video soon. You can look for that one on all the Rider-Waite-Smith decks that I have in my collection and my favorites. I'll go over those as well. One that I've kind of been playing with, and this one, I got this in my collection a while back, but as I mentioned, sometimes when I'm focusing on self-care, things are a little crazy in my life, it's hard to put energy into something that's newer to your collection, to take the energy to learn it and have to look things up if you're not necessarily familiar with the cards. This is an oracle deck that I'm talking about here. The second part of the month started being drawn to work with this deck again, and this is the Magical Dimensions Oracle deck Activators. And it's got this great box here that I have used, and it's intended for you to put your decks in there for cleansing. You can put them in there. I've been leaving mine overnight to cleanse them, and I have felt that is really, I have felt that is really powerful and worked really well for me for cleansing. It's not a way that I had considered cleansing my decks before. I've used other means, and so I enjoyed that. It also has activator cards, which I believe an easier way to describe it is when you're trying to manifest something into your life, using these cards to activate that in your life. There's some spreads in this. This is a pretty great book that has a lot of information in here, a lot of tarot spreads to tell you how to use the deck as activators. And then you can also use the deck just as a standard oracle deck. And this is what the back of the deck looks like. And then I'll just take you through some of these cards here. They're digital art, and I know there's some people that are really turned off by those. I don't mind it as long as it's done well, and I do feel like this is done well, so I can appreciate the art here. Actually, I've been using it for all of those ways. I've been using the box to cleanse my cards. I've been using the activators to try to attract some more things in my life that I'm looking for. And I've also been using it as oracle cards, and I've been doing one card pulls, or I may use it as a part of a reading that I'm doing with tarot cards. And then finally, the last deck that I wanted to show you is the Book of Shadows Tarot. And this is the, it's a 2-deck set. This is the So Below. This is what the back of these look like, and I have edged the cards there. And this is, sorry, I've got it upside down. This is the first deck that I considered my soul deck, my soulmate deck. And I just instantly felt such a connection to this. And I haven't been reading a whole lot with this in the past several years, but it's one of those decks that I could never bring myself to get rid of. I do actually have 2 copies of it because I always thought, oh, if I can't ever get, if something happens to this deck and I can't get another copy of it, it's one of those decks that I have to know that I have it, almost like a security blanket again. But I do find that when life tends to get a little bit more difficult, this is one of the decks that I go to. And here is a perfect example of one of the reasons why I love this deck. And there's little creatures in there. This one, this suit, I just love them. This suit here, which is Pentacles, has these little gnome-like creatures, and some of my spirit guides are little dwarves that look very similar to these. So I think that's one of the first reasons that drew me to this deck, is I really saw for the first time a physical representation of something that matched what I see in my spirit guides in my mind when I'm connecting with them. So that was really exciting to me, and I really felt drawn to coming back to it's almost like coming back to your hometown, revisiting things that meant a lot to you and situations. And this deck, I made so many connections, personal connections to situations in my life with each of these cards. And that's what it feels like when I'm using this deck, is I'm connecting again to personal situations in my life that felt like places I needed to visit. So I really appreciated that. I'd love to hear if any of you have decks that you really connect to, or that feel like hometown to you, or soulmate decks. I'd love to hear what those decks are, and maybe if they're decks that aren't in my collection, I can check those out. And I'm always looking for new decks that are awesome to include in my collection. So I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a message down below. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next time around.